And welcome back to Tribal Council Chat presents the Mount Rushmore series. This is episode 3 of the Mount Rushmore series. Last week we talked about Sandra with Steven from Survivor Quotes. The week before that we talked about Boston Rob with Seth Bryant, who is a huge Boston Rob fan. And you guys know me, you know Brett, but once again, we have another guest in for the Mount Rushmore series, talking with us about the great Tony Vlachos this week. You guys know him. This is his 3rd appearance on our show, which is tied for the most by a guest. He's my co-host on another Reality Realm Network show, Pit Stop Pals. I'm tired. That took me a second. Kevin Oliver is back here on Tribal Council Chat. Welcome back, dude.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Even though you about forgot the name of our show.
No, I'm just super tired. It just took me a second. I had it. I didn't completely.
And you forgot one other thing. The current Tribal Council Chat draft champion.
Yeah, he's been.
Congratulations on the win.
Thank you.
Which we knew he won like halfway through last season, but oh well. So Brett, how are we starting this? Are we just starting at the beginning of Cagayan and going forward?
Yeah, I would just go Cagayan. We'll cover that win. We'll do a brief segment on game changers because there's a little in there to talk about, even though it doesn't last very long. And then, of course, the Super Bowl of Survivor winners at war.
Yes, I love it. And we do need to touch on game changers because that game changers Tony is just hysterical to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we dive into Cagayan, what is everyone's kind of overall thoughts on Tony Vlachos in his original season, Survivor Cagayan?
It's a very unique win. I'm surprised Tony was able to pull this off twice as we see how quickly he goes in game changers. But certainly in Cagayan amongst the newbie win, it's one of the best games that there ever was, maybe next to Kim's.
Yeah. So.
Absolutely. I mean, he's a lot. And so that's it was definitely a surprising win. Not many people can be that far in front and still pull out the win. But I think that Tony is Tony's Tony because of that. And as much of the season I would not have pegged him as the winner, he played a great game.
Yeah, he did. And it's funny, last week when we had Steven on for our Sandra Mount Rushmore episode, we kind of touched a little bit on Tony because there was a bit of a Tony Sandra storyline with Game Changers. And Steven made a good point. Tony, the way Tony plays, it shouldn't work. As like chaotic and as paranoid as he is, his game shouldn't work, but it does somehow. And it's so entertaining every time. Even if he was a terrible player, even if he wasn't a winner, like just watching him entertains me, whether it's just trying to make llama noises or arguing with Jeremy about how many days are in a week, or pretty much everything he does on Game Changers. Like, oh, I'm going to go look for an idol, then sprinting off into the woods. Like, he's so chaotic, but it works somehow. And he goes deep into the 2 seasons he won. They let him go deep, and he takes control and eventually is just in charge. Both of his winning seasons, he, like halfway through the season, you realize, oh, he made it to the top somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we kind of talked about overall, what sticks out in Cagayan specifically to you guys?
He plays a similar game, and yes, he had help in both, but that in Cagayan, he did it with the Super Idol. And
Yeah.
there's a reason that super idols don't come up very often in Survivor. I think we realized with both Terry and Ewell having won the introduction, realized how powerful they were. They brought it back for in Cagayan, and Tony took full advantage. And they brought back the possibility of one in Korong, and that's why Ty makes an amazing move not to give it to Scott, because otherwise Scott can go very deep in that game with one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think some of what's most memorable to me, and this is kind of just jumping around the season, is early on, him and Sarah have the cop thing that he turns on. Him and Cass butt heads multiple times, which leads to the llama noises. It's again for somebody that like makes as many waves as he does in Cagayan, and people know he's at the top. The fact that he gets to the end is just incredible to me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely. And we'll go into some of those details because, like, I want to go into, say, the origins of Tony and Sarah in this episode. But
yeah, well, let's dive into that. What do you got?
I found this so interesting that Sarah is able to quickly call one. There's a couple of things here that I remember. The first is that Sarah's able to call Tony out, but that Tony is so skilled at this game that he can build that relationship quickly before he goes and tells the entire tribe this guy is the most dishonest person on our beach.
Yep. It's really interesting for sure.
Mm-hmm.
In so many 99 times out of 100, that's enough to kill you on day one. And instead, they build a relationship that lasts them all the way through a season of all winners 5-6 years later.
Yeah. And that's even
And
after he voted her out. And
exactly.
Which speaks to the skill of it all even more, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I do think there's a little bit of credence to the thing Tony gets knocked on is he's not great at the social part of the game. In the sense that both of the seasons he won, he either had Trish or Sarah who were constantly kind of covering, like putting out fires on his behalf. But I mean, he's still an incredible player. People use that as a lot bigger of a knock than it should be. But no Survivor player is perfect, and that's kind of his weakness, I guess. But if he can get that ally to kind of be the social part and put out fires occasionally, he's game. Like he's gonna steamroll if you don't take him out early, like they did in Game Changers.
Yeah, if that's part of his game, I mean, what's it do to change it? Like, why would we want to stop that?
For sure.
Interesting too that this was the second part I was going to add in this interaction that we get at night between Tony and Sarah. I think it's on like night 3 or 4. Sarah calls out Tony, he's exposed, and instead of just being honest and trying to build that relationship right away, the first thing Tony tries to do is lie about it. Oh no, I'm a carpenter. And the excuse that he uses is, I have a tattoo. Police officers aren't allowed to do that. Meanwhile, he's talking to another police officer who has multiple tattoos.
I forgot about
and
that.
Somehow it still kind of worked.
Yeah. And one thing I will give him credit for in Cagayan is a lot of times when someone blindsides an ally, they kind of try to placate to the blindsided person or try to butter them up on the jury. And Trish was very clearly hurt on the jury at being blindsided. And Tony just was completely honest and owned up to what he did. And like her question, was it worth it? He just point blank says yes. and
Mhm.
doesn't even try to like cover his tracks at all. So point to him on
It's
that
like
one.
when you and I, Bruce, talked to Todd and I talked to him about his FTC. Tony is just taking Todd's final and expanding it to the more modern game.
Yeah, he is. And so
What do we think, like, moving on past um the CopsRUs incident? What is there anything else you guys would add in the end of the pre-merge or going into the merge before we get into a lot of depth about the actual votes and jury questions and how we won? Because I'm sure there'll be a lot of talk on that in this first segment.
it's a
Well,
little bit into the post merge, but not too far. But blindsiding LJ, who was an ally, as soon as
Yeah.
his group had secured a majority that wasn't shaky, was a surprising move, but also a really smart one. And the thing with Tony is, he does this. He blindsides his allies, and he still gets their vote at the end.
it's killer instinct, man, because I mean LJ just gave him an idol.
Yeah.
Like a couple troubles before that and didn't even think twice about it.
Yeah.
It almost makes me think about when heroes versus villains, when Rupert's getting voted out, Sandra literally says, "I'm writing your name down, and you will still write my name down." That's the kind of that's kind of how Tony played.
Yeah, it's insane. And that's an iconic moment from Heroes versus Villains. Sandra pulled that off, and it's Tony does that constantly. And I just the fact that his game shouldn't work, but the fact that it does is incredible. And so yeah, the LJ blindside was a huge move, worked out. They kept the majority. The Sarah blindside, and like he gets her, and part of this is Wu was who he was up against, who I don't feel like had a super strong case anyway. But yeah, so that's kind of my middle of the game move is LJ.
I think I go back to what I said earlier when you make that good point about his game shouldn't work, but it just does. When everybody, excuse me, when everybody on the beach knows if we all vote for Tony, he's not going anywhere, that kind of game can work because you essentially have to build an alliance in order to defeat a super idol. You have to build an alliance that's like 2 or 3 people stronger than whatever the holder of that super idol has, and then be willing to risk the fact that he is going to write down one of our names and that person is going to lose the 1 in 8 shot at $1 million all because of him.
Yeah, that's true.
It's the only
And
way to do it.
yes, the super idol is kind of a cheat code, but I will say his game also works without the super idol, like we saw in Winners at War, where he didn't have it. So
And that we'll get into later, but I think he has some similar elements, but it's also is a different game.
yeah, he still has all the
In
chaos.
this first game, it's like he constantly is basically holding this idol over everybody, knowing that there's nobody in that game who was a big enough player that was just going to risk their chance at winning the money in order to kill his idol off, and therefore lets him play such an aggressive game while still getting to the end. And that leads Tony to be able to at least make a case to the jury that he should win. And in this case, even though he did get an extremely bitter jury, they were still willing at least to vote for him, unlike we might have seen from an All Stars jury or from a Borneo jury.
Or from this same jury if Cass was there instead of Tony.
Yeah, because there's no way Cass gets those votes.
No.
But
And honestly, she played a better game than Wu, but jury management wise, there's no way she beats him at the end of that jury.
for sure. I mean, but to Brett's point about the super idol, who knows if we're even making this podcast right now if it's not for the super idol, because I mean, I would bet that we still would. I would still, based on what we know now, I think that Tony would make it work somehow. But something that's we're highlighting a lot is this fact that Tony played so aggressively, and like Brett said, that he's allowed to do that because he has this thing that he's holding over everybody.
Yeah.
So, does he win? Does he get brought back for Winners at War? Those are all things that we got to might not have happened.
I thought
just
that
tying
same,
into that.
I thought that same question with another season that I think is even higher than Cagayan on my wins list is Cook Islands. I've thought that before too. Like, Yule gets to the end because everyone knows he has the super idol. Does he still win without it? We'll never know. That's kind of just a great what if. Marvel does. Disney Plus does the Marvel what if shows. I'd love a Survivor version of that. Just hypothetical what ifs.
Didn't you do that on your Instagram?
Yeah, I did that a little bit, and then I started running out of ideas, and those were hard to just keep thinking of storylines. So, but I would love to see Cook Islands minus the super idol. With that cast, who knows who wins?
Probably wins again, maybe Candace.
Definitely not Penner, as much as I love him. That jury wasn't voting for him.
That was in the context of that game with it.
Yeah. Getting back into Cagayan now. Where were we? Oh, Super Idol. Yeah, I don't like it. It's kind of overpowered, but it's given us some great moments. It's given us Tony finding it and faking out later in the game. Oh, this is good till this round, when actually it expired the round before, which was huge in Cagayan. The Super Idol gave us the wrong moment where they're looking at Ty because he had said he would pull his half out and he doesn't. Cook Islands is just an amazing season. There's not really any huge moments relating to the Super Idol that come to my mind there, but it's
holding that up in front of Penner and saying, "Be my ally again."
Oh, true. Yule does kind of pull that out at the auction, like, oh, they're not going to find it at Exile. I have it. Forgot about that. So, like, I don't like it as a game advantage, but it's been good for the show as a whole. It's given us a lot of great moments.
It's funny because one of the things I wrote down in relation to this Tony episode is if we go back to Final Tribal Council in Cagayan and Morgan asked her infamous question, how perfect would have been if Tony would have answered that with the super idol can influence all these men more than anything.
That would have been fantastic. And I'm glad we got a reference to Morgan's jury question in here. So
that was good. That's good.
Another probably game-defining moment from Cagayan for me, for him, though, is Final 3. Wu wins final immunity. They find out at the Final 2. Tony's like powers of persuasion, he works here. When everyone, all three of them in the game, well, I guess 2 of the 3 knew this, and the entire jury knows that Wu either wins making one choice or absolutely loses making the other choice. Everyone knew that except him, I guess, because Tony was able to convince him to bring him, which
I think that part of Wu knew it.
Then don't you know what? You're right though, because
he pulled the Colby.
He said somewhere that I'd have something along the lines of I'd have to be the dumbest survivor ever to take Tony or something like that earlier in the episode.
Because he was all about taking the best, going up against the best player and all that stuff. I think it was just another Colby situation.
Which I respect on a certain level, to be honest. Like, I respect wanting to beat the best, but if you can't beat them, it's not a good strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
Colby came close. Like, it didn't work for him. Keith would have been an easy win, but Colby came close with the votes. Wu did not come close. Did Wu get any votes? I feel like
He got at least one. It was not a unanimous vote.
I didn't think it was, but the fact that Wu got a jury vote that season is insane to me.
I'll pull up the votes while you guys are talking.
I'm going to Wikipedia right now.
I'm not.
But yep. No, Tony somehow being persuasive enough to convince Wu to take him to the end over Cass, who had arguments with Trish, with Tony, with Morgan, and more that I'm not able to name off the top of my head.
Spencer, Tasha.
Yeah.
Tasha's vote.
Tasha's.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
He was the one.
But so there was no way Cass, if it had been Cass and Wu, I think it would have been unanimous. Even though, objectively speaking, I feel like Cass played a better game strategically, but her jury management was just so awful. She would have lost to Wu. And Wu knew that, so the fact that Tony was able to convince him to take him to the final two is just impressive to me. It's one of his game-defining moves this season, for sure.
Absolutely. Also, I think we can't go any further without mentioning the Spy Shack.
Yeah, so all three Tony seasons, we have different evolutions of spying, which
Spy
we
Shack,
talked about.
Spy Nest.
Yep, and I'm glad we talked about spying with Sandra last week, because of course in Pearl Island she pulls Key aside into the woods and is spying on Fairplay and Burton. But Tony is, again, he's just entertaining to me. And the spy shack is huge. He catches Jeffra saying something. He gets out the spy bunker in Game Changers, which really nothing worked for him in Game Changers.
Spy bunker was terrible. Yeah.
Everything he did in Game Changers was terrible, but it was an entertaining couple episodes.
Yeah.
The Spy Nest and Winners at War worked out well. So
it did.
Tony being a spy is hilarious. I love the Spy Shack, and it works to get him information really well. And
if he wasn't like famous America wide, he could become an undercover officer.
Yeah. And the spot, and we'll get to this when we get to Winners at War, but the Spy Nest is also kind of a testament to his relationship and alliance with Sarah that we were talking about earlier. Because Sarah leads Natalie out to the well right in front of the Spy Nest, and then coaxes the information out of her, not Natalie having no idea. Tony's right up above them. So that was a great example of their teamwork also.
For sure, yeah.
So yeah, so I would say that's probably the biggest. The one with Wu is the biggest one that comes to my mind for me with Cagayan, but you also have his use of the Super Idol, which is overpowered, but he definitely played it off well, used it to his advantage without having to actually use it. You have the Spy Shack, where he overhears Jeffra saying something that he doesn't like, and he votes her out. You've got the LJ move, who LJ was a loyal ally to you. Like, it would have made sense to keep him, but Tony saw how likable he was and sent him home and still got his jury vote. He makes the right moves and makes risky moves when they count. And his timing with those is great. So do we have anything else from Cagayan before moving to the train wreck that is Game Changers, Tony?
I'm good.
So yeah, Game Changers Tony to me is, I mentioned earlier, the 2 games he wins, he has Trish and he has Sarah playing closely with, kind of covering some of his lacks in the social game and kind of putting out fires. He doesn't really have that person in the 2 episodes he was in of Game Changers. It's just pure chaos and kind of the most chaotic version of him. It's
He instigates himself 5 seconds onto the beach.
yeah, the whole tribe gets to the beach and like idol searching is a no-no anyway, and it's normally something you try to do in secret so that you don't get caught. Tony stands there in front of the entire tribe and says, I'm gonna go look for idols, and goes sprinting into the woods making noise.
Mm-hmm.
So where Malcolm just is already has this exhausted look on his face of, well, we need to send someone to go after him and go watch him. We have his short-lived rivalry with Sandra, which wasn't much of a close competition at all, to be honest. And he gets voted out the second episode because of that, to which Sandra replies, her reaction's great. It's kind of cocky, but that's what, something along the lines of, that's what you get for coming after me. That's what you get. The queen stays queen. Say hi to Sierra for me, who had been voted off the episode before. He doesn't last long, but Game Changers Tony is just hilarious to me. Like the amount of chaos he brought in 2 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, I've seen pictures online from a tourist who said after that Sandra was saying, say hi to Sierra for me, but then there's pictures of the 2 of them on the pre-jury trip together.
That pre-jury trip, I've seen a few pictures and posts from a few of them on that trip. That trip looks like it was a fun time.
Yeah.
But
I think that the Game Changers Tony kind of showed the naive side of him. In
yeah.
there's not a Tony that's not gonna make waves, that's not gonna get into arguments with people. But Cagayan Tony was able to do that and get away with it because of who he was fighting against.
Mm-hmm.
Cass, or I mean, nobody's gonna stand up for Cass like that. But when you're going up against somebody like Sandra,
Yeah.
you can't miss. You can't miss.
Yeah.
And he didn't just miss. He might as well have just shot himself at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was that?
Me trying to do the llama noise thing he did in Cagayan, arguing with Cass and doing a terrible job of it.
Yeah, keep your day job, Bruce.
Clip.
Oh wait.
Well, Dairy Queen. But clip that little sound I made right there and make that a text alert.
I would use it.
I would. My phone's on vibrate 95% of the time, but
Mine too.
that'd be great to have. Is like, oh, that'd be an alarm. Wake me up in the morning. Terrifying.
I think I would like throw my phone if that woke me up in the morning.
Where were we? Oh, Game Changers. Brett, what are your thoughts about Game Changers Tony, other than the fact that we didn't get Llama Tony in Game Changers?
Sad. I think he just came into the game knowing that he'd have a huge target and said, I'm here to entertain people, get paid. And that's what he did.
Yeah. And
I
Kevin,
can't fault him for that because there's no way that Tony wins that game. And frankly, I don't think there's a way that Tony can win a season of Survivor again, except when he was playing with all people who are winners in their own right, and thus just automatically gonna get rid of a huge winner.
yeah. Well, they got rid of they got rid of a few huge winners just because they were huge. Rob and Parv and Ethan all went pretty early, but
And Amber because of Rob.
yeah, oh yeah, because of the call had the whole dumb like, oh, these people played poker together years ago. They must be in an alliance thing, and Amber got caught up in that. But that the whole poker thing is still dumb to me. But oh well.
Yes.
That's,
But I guess that leads us into Winners at War.
I have one more thought from Game Changers though. Kevin made a really good point. He said there's not a version of Tony that doesn't make waves. There's also not a version of Tony, in my opinion, that doesn't bring at least a little bit of paranoia to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we see in Game Changers be his downfall, I think. Because Sandra really wasn't coming after him at first. He got super paranoid about her and started stuff. And we saw how that worked.
Works badly for him now, but causing that paranoia within the camp almost works well for him in his 2 winning games. And I would almost compare Tony's game kind of to like some of the antics that we've seen from someone named Johnny Bananas on another show.
Yeah,
Just causing chaos for the sake of chaos. And when he's calm and collected and everybody else is worried about what's Tony doing, Tony is beating you in the process.
Yeah, Tony was in a challenge. That's a great comparison. Because whatever season of the challenge it was, but that one of the girls was just getting these notes and didn't know who it was.
Vendettas.
Yeah, and thought like another girl was writing it to her, trying to start stuff, and it was just Bananas leaving them there for no reason other than to stir crap up. That would be
Bananas did that same thing in House of Villains.
Oh, wonderful. I'm looking forward to season 2 of that just because Richard Hatch is going to be on TV again for the first time since like 2004. So
nope, Biggest Loser. You keep forgetting Biggest Loser.
Interesting. Okay. That's not one.
And The Celebrity Apprentice with somebody who I cannot name on this podcast without pissing half the audience off and making the other half the audience leave comments about how great he is.
Yeah. I did not know about that one, but that's an interesting combination of people.
It was fun to watch for a while.
But yeah, Hatch is always good TV. Bananas and I have to go back and watch House of Villains because Bananas and Fairplay being in close proximity to each other seems interesting.
Must watch, man. It's so good.
Yeah.
Fun survivor note. American politics aside, Rich Hatch played for Ethan Zahn's charity on the former president's show.
Oh, wow.
But so yeah, let's move into Winners at War because the paranoia thing was kind of my last Game Changers note. He's on the call, gets put with Sandra, who the last time they saw each other in the game was heated rivalry. They decide to put that aside because they're both lions, as he later puts it later in the season. Then the storyline on the call becomes, oh, I forget who all it was. It was like Tyson and Kim and Rob, so Amber gets associated with it. They were all on this TV show years ago playing poker. They're obviously in an alliance because of that.
Germany as well.
What?
Germany as well.
Yeah. So these people get caught up, and Amber gets taken out first because of that. But the stupid poker thing that wasn't a real thing works out really well for Tony, which is why I bring it up, because he's able to just kind of fade into the background and let all that happen and keep the target off of himself early on.
And the other thing I find neat here that I want to go into is the tribe breakdown. You mentioned, Bruce, that he was put with Sandra, which was interesting because they had that rivalry. But it always confused me as to why Tony and Sarah were put on one tribe and why Natalie and Jeremy, who Natalie, for the audience who doesn't know, is one of Jeremy's kids' godmother, were put together on the other tribe. it would have been so easy to just flip Lucina and Natalie, and therefore they wouldn't have had these two pre-existing relationships that could help you but could also really hurt you at the same time, seeing that they're both physically dominant women.
Yeah, that would have made sense. And Tony ended up being fine, partially because of like the dumb poker thing. But Natalie gets first booted because her tribe lost first, and everyone knew how close her and Jeremy were.
Mm-hmm.
So production kind of inadvertently led to someone getting voted out that probably wouldn't have if not for their casting decisions and tribe breakdowns.
Yeah, I would like to hear what their rationale behind that would have been.
But overall, it's his game in Winners at War starts out kind of behind the curtain under the radar, but as the season ramps up, so does he. To where by the end of the season, he's just kind of steamrolling. But it's an interesting road to get there for sure. It's a wild ride of a season.
Mm-hmm.
So
that whole season is like
that. So go ahead, Kevin.
I just said that whole season is like a fever dream.
It is. And a good fever dream, not the Thailand type of fever dream.
Yeah.
So I guess after that, the next place that we gotta go is right after the swap. And how does Tony manage to survive the 5-way vote where Denise takes out Sandra? Because a lot of that is Denise making a mistake and Sandra leading her. But there's some great gameplay from Tony here too, to really do what Tony does, and that's try to take the threat level off himself while still playing an equally aggressive game and make no one want to get rid of him.
Yeah, for sure. And I do maintain I love the drama of it. It's one of the iconic moments of the season. But I maintain that was a bad move on Denise's part. Because you could have taken Tony out. He wins. But Sandra was wanting to work with Denise. And after taking Sandra out, Denise kind of struggled to find footing and find allies the rest of the game. So, entertaining moment, but not a great gameplay move. If Denise had made a smarter move, or kind of seen the smarter move, Tony wouldn't have survived that tribal. So he kind of lucked out there. But
it's interesting that you say that about Denise struggled to find game footing. I think a lot of that is part of Tony too. As is it with Ben. Well, we made a brief reference to it earlier, but Tony starts this whole lions and hyenas thing. And I think both Denise and Ben kind of sink their own game by wanting to work with him so that they see themselves in this top group of players, where the two of them could have easily aligned with a Michelle, a Nick, and got some of these Lion players out rather than wanting to be in the Lion group themselves.
Yeah. And since you mentioned him, I'll ask a question here that I've seen discussed way too many times online to the point where I'm bored of seeing people discuss it. But here we are. Did Ben quit?
No. And here's what I'll say. Ben made a strategic choice in his mind, especially after how controversial his win was in 35, to decide I would rather give my vote to Sarah Lucina as opposed to, and be on the jury himself, as opposed to sit next to Sarah and get no votes and have the whole jury say he didn't do anything, and therefore it would start up the whole conversation about did Chrissy deserve to win.
Yeah, because I don't think there was any idols hidden right under where he was sleeping this time. So that would have helped.
Shut up.
For those who don't know in the audience, Kevin is... You guys are still there. Okay, sorry, my Zoom's being weird. Kevin is a huge Ben fan, so I just kind of had to throw that out there to mess with him a little bit.
Ben did not quit.
No, he didn't. I agree. Ben didn't quit and Sandra didn't quit. People just like to say they did because they don't like either one of them.
In contrast, Perla and Sean, they quit.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And in Tony's first season specifically, Lindsay quit.
Lindsay quit.
There we go. Sorry, my Zoom was frozen for a little bit, but I'm back now. And you guys are moving again, so.
Just be better.
Well, I don't control Zoom, unfortunately. Zoom, zoom, zoom.
Thank God. Thank God.
So after that, let's go into the. I mean, I think. Tell me if I'm skipping ahead of anything that you guys have, but we can't do a Tony episode without talking about this is extortion and that disadvantage
Oh, yeah.
and the
Oh, yeah.
Sophie blindside that came after it. Because in my mind, from a gameplay perspective, this is the ultimate peak of Winners at War.
I do love that. Real quick though, pre-merge, the scene where I think Sarah, it was either Tony or Sarah, has to go to the other tribe's camp. It was Sarah. Because Tony's
yes.
like, getting like ash and stuff and rubbing it on her face to try to camouflage her for some, and it just doesn't work at all. It's absolutely hilarious.
Yes, that was hilarious, and it's great because it's just another step in the relationship actually working together again, only to lead into that moment I was just talking about, where it's kind of once again CopsRUs is on the ropes, and Tony manages to talk his way out of it.
Yeah. So let's get into that, because that was kind of the blind side of the season with Winners at War. Tony sees how close his number one ally, Sarah, is getting with Sophie. They were both on Yara together without him. He organizes a blindside on.
Both pulled off a big move to blindside Boston Rob on that beach.
Yeah, I don't think Rob was ever surviving that beach because they just didn't like him there. So no, he didn't help his case any. Trying to play the buddy system doesn't work as well with Winners as it does with the Redemption Island cast. But
The buddy system should never work.
it did though. It worked with the Redemption Island cast, so he thought it would work with the 40 cast, and it failed.
Look, unless Natalie and Ashley are on your tribe who think that Survivor is a suntanning holiday.
It wasn't just those two. It worked with Philip also, who just kind of did whatever Rob.
Okay, are you really using Philip to make a case in anything?
I'm not making any case. I'm just pointing out Philip was there, unfortunately.
What are you talking about? Unfortunately, Philip is a great TV character.
I was kidding when I said it. Philip's a great character. He's entertaining TV. If I were on a beach with him, he would drive me insane. I'll put it that way. Right? He's entertaining. He's fun, but he would be really annoying to play with, I feel like. But yeah, Rob was never surviving. You knew it. But anyway. Yeah, so Tony organizes the votes to blindside Sophie, who at that point in Winners at War felt like the front runner. If we were doing power rankings, and a few of the podcasts I was listening at the time had her at the top. And she goes home in a massive blindside, and he leaves Sarah out of it. And Sarah is heated and ticked coming back to camp. And this is where Tony's persuasion comes in, like we saw with Wu. He talks her down.
I'm going to repeat. I said it with Denise. I'm going to repeat it with Sarah. If Sarah can go to the end with Nick, Michelle, or Denise, Sarah has probably about a 50-60% chance to win the game. And instead, she goes right back and plays with him.
Uh-huh. I'm curious what would have happened if she had won Fire.
She would have won.
I think she still wins, but it would be interesting.
I have a long rant about this we can go into at the end.
I will say this, and I'm not going to get into breaking down votes or anything because I'm not prepared for that, but when Rob voted for Tony, his confessional was talking to Natalie saying, I said you needed to play perfect when you came back in. You almost did. The one thing you didn't do was take this guy out, and it says Tony. If she sets up Tony in fire and he goes home, maybe that pushes Rob into voting for her is all I can think of. But I still think Sarah wins.
I think Rob wanted Natalie to take Tony out herself.
But if you're putting, I feel like that should still count as taking someone out. You put them in fire and they lose. They went because you put.
I'm gonna say I'll hold it. Eventually, Bruce, we will probably do a Winners at War episode in another off season. I will break down my what if Sarah beats Tony in that episode.
Which is gonna be you predicting Michelle would have won, I'm guessing. But which it's likely.
It's me predicting that it goes to a tiebreaker.
Oh wow, that's interesting. Can't wait to record that.
That's why I want to wait till the episode. I could probably break it out for like 5 minutes, and I'm curious to see you actually break down votes as well in between 47 and 48.
Yeah, for sure. But
Christmas time, guys.
Also, and I'm jumping way back to earlier in the season, like first couple episodes of Winners at War, but Tony building a ladder was great TV.
Mm-hmm.
Because Tony did a terrible job building a giant ladder, then climbed up it, as his whole tribe was telling him, including someone that makes furniture for a living, was telling him how sketchy the ladder was. And he just completely ignored everyone and climbed up his ladder and almost fell because I think one of the rungs slipped. But
he didn't.
He's just great, even when it's not strategic or not gameplay. Him just being Tony is hilarious. And you also have a scene of him and Jeremy debating how many days are in a week somehow. And I don't know how Tony came away with there being 5 days in a week, but that is an actual conversation they had on that show.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm guessing it probably has some. I think that whole debate had more context than what we got to see through the TV. And that is that Tony and Jeremy talking are not just two castaways and two guys playing Survivor. They are two people who work in 911.
Yeah,
and therefore probably have very different experiences of how the schedule works if you're Tony randomly pulling an overnighter in Jersey City on the police force, or if you're Jeremy sleeping in the fire station because you spend 2 days on, 2 days off, or 2 days on, 3 days off, or whatever they might do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I feel like the answer is obviously the Sophie blindside. So I'll say other than the Sophie move, what would you guys say was kind of his game-defining move per se with his Winners at War win? Because we kind of said with Cagayan it was the woo persuasion. So
I think it's his immunity run.
Yeah.
And we don't see Tony as a physical threat the way we do a, say, Colby or a Mike Holloway. And he wins, 4 individual immunities in this game?
Yeah.
Allowing people like, and I'm going to bring up 2 points that I wanted to here in one, but the fact that he has all these immunities and the fact that he builds relationships leads to a situation like one of my favorite moments from the season where Michelle is telling Sarah, we got to take Tony out or else you have no chance to win, and nobody pays any attention to her. Because either one, first of all, shameless plug, Michelle was right. Nobody else on that beach was paying any attention to how the game was going. And two, if Tony, some of those tribals is vulnerable, people do start to see that he's playing a great game, but half the time he couldn't be voted out.
Yeah. And I will say, Michelle was one of 2 people that saw
in there too.
Michelle was one of 2 people actually that saw that Tony was running things, because Kim mentioned a few episodes earlier we need to get Tony. He's dangerous. He's the power player here. And then Tony wins immunity, so they rat her out and Kim goes home.
And that kind of goes right into the point that I was making, is maybe Kim is able to make that point better with a Sophie, with a Michelle, with Nick, with Denise, if Tony doesn't keep winning those immunities at clutch times that he needed them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also, like you mentioned it, but we kind of got sidetracked. Tony reading the letter that this is an extortion advantage, and him being, oh, cool, I get to break the law, I get to extort someone. Then he keeps reading.
He does.
He keeps reading and says it's being played against you, and says, "Man, this should be illegal. On the outside world, this is illegal. I don't know the criminal code for it, but it's illegal." Like
That was such
flip on a
great-
dime. It's so good. He's hilarious.
for sure.
But yeah. So, do we have anything else winners at war related or discussion from his career before we move into our game?
I will say something real quick that kind of is about all of it, and I hear them. Yeah, they say this on our Hap a lot, and I completely agree with it. And it's the fact that I think, at least for this coming into Winners at War, Tony needed Game Changers Tony to have occurred, because he was able to ridiculously drop his threat level from what we saw in Cagayan to absolutely flaming out in epic glory in Game Changers.
Yeah, and I forget what season it was, but because of I think it was between Game Changers and Winners at War. Maybe it would have been after Cagayan, but at some point, someone's sitting at a tribal council and says, "I don't want to be super paranoid. I don't want to be like Tony Vlachos out here." Which it has to have been after Game Changers, because why would you say that about someone that had won their only appearance you've seen? But like, it's gonna bug me said that now, but I remember
one of your favorite players too, Bruce. Tony's game is so good that it translates into other seasons, just like Rob's does. We see Kelly Wentworth refer to War Dog as having a bit of Tony in it.
I've said for years, War Dog is like the Walmart brand version of Tony. The difference is War Dog got antsy and made his. As much as I love Kelly, taking her out was a smart move. He just did it
Too early.
Too early.
Yeah.
He got antsy. Tony is able to wait until the right moments to make the moves and pick and choose those moments. Whereas War Dog did it too soon, revealed his threat level, and sunk his game.
And may I say, I am so excited to see Tony Vlachos on our screen again come probably January on Traders Season 3. It's going to be epic.
Oh, yeah. With Jeremy Collins, with
Rob Mariano, Carolyn White.
And Rob, who was part one of this Mount Rushmore. It's going to be so good.
And Carolyn.
Yeah, I love that, like, the 4 Survivor players are 3 winners, 3 incredible players, and nothing against her, and then Carolyn.
Who's such a great character of the new era, even not being a winner.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
She's going to be fun to watch. I don't really know what to expect from her on that show. I don't know what to expect from Tony, though, because on one hand, I could see him doing really well, but on one hand, paranoia tends to put Tony in trouble, and the Traders is a game designed to create paranoia in you anyway.
If I had to make an assumption based on what I would think is going to happen, I think kind of like what you were saying with Game Changers, Tony, there is no way that this guy wins a game unless it is with those winners or whatever. I don't think there's a way that Tony Vlachos is going to win Traders. I think he's going to be there for his check and to entertain us on our TV kind of like Johnny Bananas. If he goes first, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
I'm really hoping to see Tony as a faithful, because Tony being investigative Tony, trying to figure things out, is hilarious to me. We talked about the spy shack and the spy bunker and the spy nest. I am waiting for the spy suit of armor, because the trader's mansion seems to have these knight suit of armor just standing there on display around it. And I'm waiting for Tony to make the spy suit of armor and be inside one of those somehow.
But now that I think about Tony being a faithful, I could also see your investigative Tony being the faithful of faithfuls that they have no choice but murdering, kind of like a John Brokaw of last season.
I was going to say Peter from last season. John was less annoying, though, so I like your comparison better, because I didn't like the idea of comparing Tony to Peter. But what I want from this season, and I'll say this, then we can get into a line blindside first boot. I want to see Rob be a traitor. I want to see his strategic mind in the traitor turret.
Yeah.
I don't just because I think that it's gonna be too obvious. I think that as a traitor he would not succeed just because of how he is known.
I'm just waiting for how Traitors is going to turn into all of his survivors. Well, all of his Survivor seasons besides this first one, and Deal or No Deal Island, which is the people that don't like him are just using the phrase Rob and his minions all the time, and just everyone against Rob somehow, which is what most of his seasons eventually become. But man, yeah, Deal or No Deal Island, Rob's exit on there annoyed me just because he did it to himself, and he overcame being targeted so many times just to shoot himself in the foot. But let's get into a line blindside first boot. Who wants to go first?
Not me. I got to think about it.
All right, I'll go. I am going to give 3 memorable jurors from Tony's time on Survivor. So your options for a line blindside first boot are Trish, Rob Mariano, and Morgan.
I'm first booting Trish for sure. And part of me wants to align with Rob because it's been proven through people like Natalie and Philip that and Aaron on Deal or No Deal Island, that if you align with Rob and you gain his trust and you're not trying to go after him, you can get pretty far in the game that way. But if I can get to the end with Morgan, I feel like that's an easier win for me. Because people didn't... Morgan was hilarious. I loved having Morgan on my screen. She was hilarious. She was fun. But people didn't like her. So I guess I'm going to align with her and blindside Rob. But I could see aligning with Rob too, just to kind of play that Philip Natalie role. But, not be Philip and Natalie and actually have my own gameplay.
Yeah. But you're forgetting, if you were not Philip or Natalie, you wouldn't be at the end with Rob.
I could be Aaron. Aaron did his own
Aaron
thing.
didn't make it to the end with Rob.
They
cut Aaron first because he was with Rob.
Because Rob had immunity. They liked Aaron.
Yeah, they liked Aaron, but he was with Rob, and so they cut him. I am first booting Rob all day long. I don't want to sit at Final Tribal with him, even though it's been.
Bring him up.
What's that?
Since you all bring him up, I'm just gonna say I walked down the stairs and first saw Aaron on my television. Looked at the TV, looked at my dad, and said, "Is John Cochran on this show too?"
I see the comparison. They're personality-wise, they're similar for sure.
And I loved Aaron. He was awesome.
I loved Aaron. There was a few people on that show I did not like as much that I wish would not have gone as far. but
Same.
I'm
Uh,
bad with names. I can picture them, but I'm
Stephanie.
was Stephanie the one that like had it out for Alyssa for no reason and then decided she had it out for Aaron and Rob also for no reason?
Yeah.
Yeah, her and I think Amy was the other one. The one
Amy.
with
Yeah.
a kind of annoying voice, but just yeah, those two I wish wouldn't have gone very far. But
Same.
that was a really
Apologies, Kevin. What were your picks?
Yeah. I am first booting Boston Rob, both for Bruce's rule of get rid of the winner, but also for the sake of I don't want to be grouped with Boston Rob, because as much as I like watching him on my screen, a lot of the people that he associates himself with do not have a great view by everyone else. As well as he does have one of the best minds in the game, and I just don't want to risk that in the end. I'm gonna align with Morgan because I can deal with her before longer than I can deal with Trish. So
I feel like she wouldn't be that bad to deal with. Trish would annoy me. I feel like Morgan wouldn't be that annoying to deal with, honestly.
no, I agree.
For me, I am going to first boot Trish. I don't want her anywhere near my jury after that. And I'm going to do the complete opposite. I'm going to align with Boston Rob. We've seen his jury management isn't great, with the exception of a cast where he's playing against a bunch of people who, frankly, with the exception of maybe Andrea, aren't that good at well, yes, Andrea is good at Survivor. I said that wrong. But Rob and Andrea are the only two people who are good at Survivor on that cast. Everyone else is kind of blah. But
Well,
in
Russell,
terms of
I would say Russell's good at Survivor. He just can't win.
Yeah.
true, I'm more thinking of those who are at Final Tribal Council. Russell went home before that.
Fair enough. I thought
But
you meant the cast as a whole.
you're right. But no, I look at a game like All Stars and go, yeah, I'm okay sitting next to Rob. He'll find a way to do what he did in even in Winners at War and anger some people on the jury. Morgan, I think, would be great on as a juror. Um, though certainly she's kind of indifferent in to me. She would be a good ally, but maybe not one that I would think could get me all the way to the end. So I'll put her in that spot.
Nice. I'll go next. Thinking on the spot. I will go with Jatia Taylor from Cagayan and Caleb Reynolds from Game Changers. And not on a Tony tribe, but was rather chaotic on Winners at War, Danny Boatwright.
Interesting. I am going to
Kevin's
once
face there when I
again,
said that.
align with the winner. And that's Danny in this case. I think Danny is someone who is I know people will say she should have taken Rafe, but very loyal throughout the game. I don't believe she should have taken Rafe. I think once you get down to final 5-6 in Survivor, it's every person for themselves, and that's just the way the game works. I think she's very good to help an alliance move forward, and yes, does have that chaotic side that could help you be able to win. Um, I'm gonna blindside Caleb. We haven't seen him go far, so it's just kind of a random spot for Caleb. We saw him once get voted out early. We saw him once get medically evacuated, so I don't really have that much of information to go off of. And so as much as I want to put the blame on Garrett, because I'll attest that in my opinion, Garrett is one of the worst Survivor players of all time, far worse of a player than Jatia. I can't not first boot somebody who dumped all the rice out, especially as Spencer would say, if that person is a nuclear engineer.
Hmm.
Well, Bruce, I'm going against your rule this time. because I'm going to first boot Jatia. I also can't see myself going anywhere with somebody who dumps out the rice. And this is where it gets interesting. Out of the two, I would much rather play the game with Danny Boatwright, but I think I'm going to blindside her, and go to the end with Caleb. I think early on he has literally proven that he will die to win a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that goes without saying. And I think that the fact that this isn't even his first time on reality TV, or like that he's been on 2 shows, I think that I could spin that in my favor as well. So I'm going there.
Yeah. Before I share my picks, also, you kind of facepalmed when I gave you these names. I would like to note this list of names is a lot better than the list I gave the
Yes,
second time you were on the show. When you had
correct.
Bianca, Colton, and Rababa. He spells
Yeah,
Robert.
you are a monster for that. This one, I just didn't know where I wanted to go.
But I will also ignore my winner rule. I just don't see myself going very far with Jatia. Sometimes, if a third person ever dumps out a whole bag of rice, I'll do an aligned blindside first boot with Jatia, the new rice dumper, and Brandon Hantz all in a game together. But next time Kevin's on. But
I will throw my phone.
I'm gonna blindside Danny because yes, she played really good. I'm not gonna get into this yet, but to the final Guatemala yet. But Danny played good her first season, but was kind of a train wreck at times on Winners at War, including saying right in front of Ben, who won season 35 when they were on 40, and said there's an old school alliance thing going, not knowing when Ben played. We've seen a few times somebody play really well early Survivor, then come back years later and just doesn't do as well with the new, faster game. As much as the game has changed since her winning season, I don't know how good of a player Danny would be coming back for a third season. I just thinking the game is too fast now. Hopefully I'd be wrong, but I'm gonna blindside her. I'm gonna align with Caleb because he's the only one left. But also we've seen Caleb's a loyal guy. We've seen him with Ty on both of his seasons and seeing their bond. So hopefully I can kind of get that type of thing going and keep him from overheating. I got nothing for game changes. He just got voted out there. But I feel like Caleb is somebody I could go deeper with. And really quick, before we get to Kevin's names, Kevin, you recently finished Danny's winning season. If you were on that jury, where's your vote going?
Stephanie.
Yes! I barely lost our polls on social medias when we added everything together the week we did our Guatemala Final Tribal Council episode. So I'm happy I have an ally here. Sorry, we don't need to do that. That was just a quick question because I wanted to be right about something. So, who are your 3 names?
Okay. I also didn't prepare for this part. What are you laughing about, Bruce?
Just me right now. I'm way too hyper for some reason.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I didn't miss something. Okay. It just came on the top of my head, and I didn't want to go the route of the jurors that you guys went with, or people that played with him, whatever. So I was trying to think about something else about Tony that I could use, and what I came up with was his bald head. And so I'm going to go with 3 bald survivors. So we're going to say Ty Trang, Brad Culpepper, and David Wright.
Interesting.
Ooh,
I am gonna align with Culpepper. I think it would be neat to work with him. He seems to be very competitive and very trustworthy, can lead your tribe forward. His son played at Syracuse, so one of the 2 college teams I cheer for is his son's school. That would give us something to bond over. I'm going to blindside Ty. Ty is a player that can be very good at the game, could be a good juror. As we see right at the beginning of Kalong, he's just kind of erratic, and you don't really know what you're gonna get with Ty. And that leads me to, from what I've seen, first boot David, because we've either seen two versions of David. We've seen David who is having a panic attack over things that are going on the island in the natural world, or we've seen David that's the super fan to the point that he's literally studying books of every single challenge, both of which I don't want to compete against. And people really like him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna first boot David because Culpepper and Ty have both proven to be good people to go to the end with and beat them. So I am going to blindside Culpepper though and align with Ty, because if I align with Ty, I'm not just gaining one vote on my side, but where Ty goes, Mark the Chicken goes, and Mark the Chicken is a power player, and I want his vote to be the same as my vote. So I'm aligning with both of them.
I've always wanted to say this in front of Brett. Mark the Chicken is my favorite player on Co Wrong. He's my MVP of the season.
I love that. I think it's Jason is getting up there to ask his question, and Mark just starts flapping his wings, and they're like, "Okay, calm down, Mark." Like they're all just used to the chicken at this point.
What chicken? What other bird? What other anything that's not a human being could make it 39 days on Survivor?
Yeah.
Testament to
the other
Ty's
thing I always
persuasion.
wonder, Cambodia has lots of monitor lizards and whatnot. Mark made it to final tribal council. But the minute Ty let him go, I bet he had no more than 10 minutes on this earth.
Shout out to Ty's persuasion skills for convincing a tribe of people that don't have food to not kill the chicken for meat.
For real.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to the chicken that got sacrificed in Guatemala, because that was quite a storyline.
Yeah.
Guatemala was a fun season.
I'm going to take my boy Ty to the end. I don't even care how erratic he can be. I absolutely love Ty Trang. He is one of my favorite players from the 30s and probably in the whole franchise, especially non-winners. And I would love to play the whole game with Ty Trang. I'm going to blindside for the sake of, I also love this man, David Wright. He's very scary. I would not want to take him to the end, but I would love to play a game with him. Brad Culpepper is, I don't have any disdain for Brad Culpepper. Out of these three people, he's the one I care the least about. And so instead of, usually I would look at this in a strategic way. Right now, I picked three guys to where I'm going to go with what my heart says, not what my brain says, and first boot Brad Culpepper.
Nice. This was a fun episode, guys. Kevin, thanks for coming on again. It's always fun when you're on here.
Absolutely a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
If you guys want to listen to more of just Kevin mercilessly making fun of me for no reason, go check out Pit Stop Palace. That's kind of
it happens
over there.
So much more there.
There's so much more, but it's a lot of that.
I mean that I make fun of you so much more there than I did here.
Oh yeah, no, that we got a little bit of a sample. My mom actually said the sentence one time: if Kevin ever can't make it, I can co-host with you. I can make fun of you really well also. I don't know if I was supposed to do that on an episode, but here we are. She won't mind. But
on that note, while you guys talk about your other show, if anyone's getting excited for the Challenge Battle of the Era season 40 over on MTV, look out for by the time you hear this, it will already be airing New Generation Challengers with myself and my friend Titi Fernandez talking all about the challenge.
And man, I'm going to be relying on you for that because I got a new cable TV provider this week, and we do not have MTV, and it breaks my heart.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was annoying for me is from like
Find any
38,
links on Facebook, Kevin. I'll send them to you.
38, 39, I was at school and didn't have, like, I was watching them on my computer and was like having to log in with my cable and watch them off MTV's website, which is kind of a hassle to scroll through their shows. But
Yeah.
looking forward to it. Looking forward to another Reality Realm show starting. Be watching for announcements on another show that we have planned to launch at some point.
Yep.
Not soon, but that'll be
Whatever.
coming. And with that being said, grab your torches, head back to camp. Bye, everyone.
See ya.